Swinging from street lights, I wish we could go back to when we went singing in the rain.
You are listening to Singing in the Rain, a podcast series that interviews artists, educators, and innovators who are focused on positive social change in difficult times. Singing in the Rain is a production brought to you by Claremont Lincoln University, CLU Live. Greetings, everyone. It's Dr. David Carter with Claremont Lincoln University, CLU Live, coming back at you live again in the studio with another episode of Singing in the Rain. And I'm here in the studio today with no one. It's just me by myself. But I'm going to play you an episode that I think speaks to everything we're doing with ethics and leadership. And it's actually an interview that I conducted a number of years ago with a very influential person in my life, in the lives of many people. And so I'm proud to announce that we will have our first professor of civic engagement. And to get that title correct, that is the Jerry D. Campbell Professor of Civic Engagement, and it's named after our first president, Dr. Jerry D. Campbell. This new professorship that we're announcing, be sure to check out our Instagram page, also our website, etc., all social media channels, is going to be amazing for the university. It's going to place us into an entirely new category. I served in a similar role a number of years ago when I was named the Farley Professor of Leadership and Ethics at Washburn University. And so this episode dives into that just a little bit. So let's jump right into this interview, and then immediately after that, I'll come back on and just share a few thoughts with you. This is David Carter. It is July 19th. The time is just 9:21 a.m. I am here at Washburn University with President Jerry Farley.
Yes, good morning.
And thank you, sir, for taking time out of your busy day and busy schedule to sit down with me. So I'm very excited about the interview and have a few questions for you, if you don't mind.
I'd be glad to respond.
Excellent, excellent. Well, if we could start off, if you could please tell me a few words about your path to your leadership position here at Washburn University.
Well, I graduated with a degree in business from the University of Oklahoma. Spent a little time in the military, then came back, got a master's of business, and then got a PhD, all from the University of Oklahoma. PhD was in higher education administration. I began working for the university after I graduated with a bachelor's degree. My field was accounting and finance, and so I became a financial administrator at a university and took the additional degrees just because I was there and I was interested in it, and I saw that was a pathway to the future in higher education. You have the degree, you have opportunity. So I took those degrees and just stayed in higher education, primarily in the administrative side. I wound up being chief financial officer at 3 institutions in Oklahoma.
Oh, wow.
Which is sort of odd because it's sort of like going from Kansas State to Kansas or back and forth, and I did back and forth. But primarily in the administrative side of things. I was never a department head or a dean. Although I did teach every semester in either in the business school or in the education department in higher education. I would teach at least one course a semester. Did not anticipate ever leaving Oklahoma. I was born and raised there, went to school there, worked there. And did not, my aspiration, my dream job was to be CFO, and I got to do it at 3 different places. And so I loved it. And the job of president was never something that I had given much thought to or aspired to. Wow. And so after I'd been CFO for quite a long while, an opportunity came up to look at a presidency, and I did. I didn't get it, but it was a fun process. Yes. It was an interesting process, and I knew I wasn't going to get it when I applied. I had gone all my education at the University of Oklahoma, worked there as CFO, took a job as CFO at Oklahoma State University. ooh. Tense.
Yes.
Left there, came back, took a job at Oklahoma Health Sciences Center. Okay? The job of presidency at Oklahoma State came up, and I was nominated and urged to apply, and I knew that it was unlikely, being an OU person, that I would ever get that. But it was a great experience.
Yes.
And it led me to think, I might like to do that. This job came up a year or so later at Washburn. I applied, and much to my surprise, they hired me.
Excellent.
And it seems to have worked out. I'm starting my 17th year. So it's been good. I love the job. It was just perfect.
Yes, sir. Thank you for sharing that with me. Wow, that is indeed a path to leadership.
Yeah, and how do you chart out something like that? It didn't really. I wanted to be a CFO, but I knew that if I was going to stay in higher education, I better plan for that, and I'd take the additional degrees, and I liked doing it.
Yes.
And you take progressively more responsible positions because you've learned more. You've done everything you think you can in the previous position, so you take a new position. And each time you do that, it is very likely that you have to exhibit more leadership in what you do and exercise leadership in what you do, and so it just sort of grows. So some people may have a grand plan from the time they were in high school, but some people don't.
Sure. I certainly didn't.
Yeah.
So I appreciate it. If I could continue on, sir.
Please.
What were the epiphanies or persons who might have influenced your choices to become a leader in life?
I grew up on a farm, and so small town, and a lot of discipline in doing that. My dad also owned a service station, and so I would move back and forth between when I got old enough doing the farming and working at the service station, and so a lot of discipline. You understood you had to work. You understood you had to show up. You understood you had to do things in the right timeline, whether you wanted to or not, or things wouldn't work. Early on in my career at the university, I got opportunities to do progressively more responsible things. And there were people that I admired and learned from. There were people that were helpful mentors. And they would plant a seed, and if it seemed to work and it made sense, things would evolve.
Yes.
And I remember when I left Oklahoma State, and went to the health center. I didn't know that the president was going to leave. I thought he would stay a good long while.
Yes.
When I left, he said, one of these days you might think about being a president.
Really?
It's the first time I'd ever had anybody utter those words, and I'd never thought of that. I'm thinking, you've got to be kidding, I'm an accountant. But when he left a couple of years later, 3 or 4 years later, I remembered that, and I said, okay, somebody nominated me because I had a pretty good reputation on that campus. So, those kind of things influence you, and you watch what successful people have done, people that you believe are good leaders, and you try to emulate them.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. That is interesting, how those seeds got planted.
Timing.
Yes, definitely. If you're to describe at least 5 qualities that have made you the person you are and the leader you are today, what would those be?
Most things in any environment, if you're going to succeed, are built around relationships.
Okay.
And it's people that you're working with and people that you are serving with. And relationships are all built the same way: trust, respect, commitment, integrity.
Yes.
In every relationship, whether it's with your spouse or your children or your boss or department to department. So I think you have to be. All those things are embedded in building relationships. But each of them independently, if people don't trust you, then you're not going to be a leader. If you don't leave people, if they don't treat you with respect and you leave with them treated with respect, you're not going to build a relationship. If you don't have the integrity, you're not going to succeed. It's just not possible. If you're not all committed to the same outcome, you're not going to succeed. So I think that all of those characteristics are important. If you had to subscribe to a single leadership theory, I'm not sure which one would be the epiphany. Situational leadership, clearly timing is you may be a great leader, but if time is not there for what your skills are, it just doesn't work out. Dwight Eisenhower happened to be the right person at the right time. Winston Churchill was the right person at the right time, and when the war was over, he didn't succeed. He was voted out. We had a great leader like that, voted out of office. So a lot of it is timing and taking advantage of it. A lot is preparation. You can learn to be a better leader. You can practice, and you can exercise it, and you can study. And I believe in servant leadership. All of us are following someone. I have bosses in my job, every leader has to have people that are following them, and all of us have to be followers at some point in time. You have to understand what that is and how to make that work. So servant leadership, I think, is a really powerful concept.
Thank you.
It's probably more than what you wanted there.
Oh, no, that's excellent. It's excellent. It's in depth, so I appreciate that. That's qualitative research depth of it.
Keep the tape.
If I could ask you, having led this university and coming on 17 years now, as you mentioned, how has your thought on what the role of a leader should be, has that changed over time?
I don't know that it's changed. It's probably been reinforced. All of these things that we talked about a moment ago. And all of us make mistakes, and leaders make mistakes. You do things that you wish you could have a do-over. But generally, if a person in a leadership position can bring other people along toward that commitment of everybody wanting to achieve the same outcome, and if the leader can share, vision is trite, but it can share the vision, can share where each person in the organization as an individual saying, what's my role here? If you can see what your role is and how it contributes to the overall role, what I try to do here is tell whether it's a custodian or a clerical person or a faculty member, your job is to teach students. That's what we do at Washburn. We focus on teaching, and we're here to educate next generation. And custodian can help with that just as a faculty member can. Custodian is just as important to the success of the university as a faculty member is. If you didn't empty that waste paper basket that had that banana peel in it for a few days, you'd see how important that custodian really is.
Yes. Yes.
And so, as you try to create that environment where people feel good about what they're doing and want to do it and want to do well, you succeed. And then you're viewed, whether it's true or not, you're then viewed as having some leadership skills and leadership traits. People will often tell me, and I feel uncomfortable even saying this, but people say, "Boy, you've really done a great job at the university. I like what you've done at the university." And inevitably, always, I will say, other people doing the work.
Yes.
If it wasn't for the other people, it wasn't for the teachers in the classroom, custodians emptying the waste paper baskets, none of this would have happened. Now, I just have one role to play, and I try to do that role, and that's, they have a role to play. Each of us has a role to play, and typically that role is that you've got to be the leader. You've got to be the visible person. You're the one that has to stand up.
And that's something that has stood out to me. If I can interject there with Washburn University, and even the custodians in that I noticed it. My wife noticed it as well. That there is an emphasis there in terms of their importance here, and they are some of the nicest custodians I've ever met on campus, honestly. And during our time here, I mean, it really felt more like a family atmosphere than it did anything else.
It is. That's what we try to do. And I don't know the first name of all the custodians on campus. We have a lot of turnover, but I know all the custodians that work in this building. Even though we have turnover, I'll know them. I know the groundskeeper. I probably know most of them, as a matter of fact. The facilities staff, I know them. I'm sure that I know proportionally as many of the staff as I do of the faculty. And faculty is what you see all the time. But they all, if it wasn't for them, you're right, it wouldn't create the atmosphere.
Right. Thank you, sir. That's definitely true. Moving forward, one of the strategic goals that at least I've been able to determine from your strategic plan and reading that, correct me if I'm wrong, and you've done so over the years as well, is to implement new buildings on campus, also renovate buildings on campus. And it's my understanding that there's a possible partnership in the work with Kansas Bureau of Investigation and a new building out there, even a new law school. How's that process going for you?
Most presidents that I've got to know over the years, in fact, the last one I worked for in Oklahoma, he was a senator, and he brought him in as a president. I worked for him, 3 or 4 years. When he first came, because I was chief financial officer when he first came, he said, well, I need to know because we had a lot of buildings underway down there at that time. He said, I need to know about all those. I said, that's not going to be what I try to do while I'm here at the university. I'm going to do blah, blah, blah. He's built more buildings down there than his predecessors did in decades. Same thing when I came here. The important thing is kids get a good education. Well, you have to have facilities to do that. But we also recognize that facilities will drive the atmosphere on campus. This campus was, for years, decades, had drifted to be a part-time student, commuter, non-traditional age, non-residential campus. And so people would come and go. They were mostly part-time, and things were okay, and they were getting good education. But it wasn't a sense of a university. And at that point, the number of high school graduates, 17 years ago, the number of high school graduates in the state were going up and would peak about a year ago. And we weren't attracting them. And there were a lot of reasons why we weren't attracting them, but a lot of it was facilities. We didn't have a bed to put them in. And Mom and Dad from Western Kansas are not going to pack Sally off and say, off to Topeka you go, hope you find a place to live. They want that traditional experience. So we use facilities as a way to change that environment on campus and built a residence hall, built some apartments, and then added some student-oriented facilities, improved some of the high quality programs that we have, and improved their facilities. We've renovated just about every building on campus, and so so you wind up doing that, you know, and it just happens now. For this campus, because I knew how to do those things just from having done it for my career, we were able to put it together and make that happen. And they had either not had the insight or had the people in the right places to do that for a few decades. And so we were able to put that together. Also, facilities and expanding and growing creates an environment in itself, and it creates an image that, wow, things are getting better, things are changing. Look what's happened to the campus because they see a new building.
Yes.
We could be doing the most remarkable thing that's never been done before in the history of the world in a classroom. Mm-hmm. People in Topeka wouldn't know about it.
Right.
Wouldn't know about it. Build a new building, say, ooh, look at that new building. So we built a number of buildings, and we have some that we have planned right now. We're going to we're going to repurpose this building into a student service center and put a new facade on the front of it.
Excellent.
For a couple of different reasons. We're going to build a new law school. The current law school isn't the way we teach law anymore. Doesn't fit the model. We're going to make it the focal point, the major facility on the southeast corner of the campus. That site's crying out for something since you've arrived at Washburn. And then we came up with this idea of partnering with Kansas Bureau of Investigation. They need a new crime lab. We proposed a partnership 7-8 years ago. It just wasn't the right time. and few people were interested in it, but they didn't have support. So this time there was support that was building, and the governor called me, and he wanted to support it and wanted to know if we would help.
Yes.
And we have forensic programs, and we can share some of our faculty members to help them in the labs. They can share some of their scientists, teach some of our classes. Students will have internships and jobs potentially. They're going to give us a little bit of space in the building to conduct some classes and expand classes, and so everything just kind of fit together. Excellent. And suddenly people thought, well, golly, that's a great idea. Well, okay, good. It's a complicated project, though. It is it's a complicated construction project because of the sophistication of laboratories, but it's also a complicated political project and complicated financing project, a complicated process by which we pull all that stuff together. And it isn't all done yet. I mean, there's still a long way to go on it. There's some significant things that have to occur this fall.
Yes, sir.
Significant. So,
thank you for sharing that. It definitely sounds like a big initiative for any university today.
$55 million project.
Wow.
That's a lot for us to do.
So a lot of meetings for you, that means, in trying to raise funds.
Yeah.
Definitely. If you could tell me a few words about the importance of sound judgment as a leader, and how this has possibly helped you achieve some of Washburn's strategic goals.
Everybody hopes for good judgment. And the way as the old saw goes, the way you develop better judgment is from poor judgment.
Yes.
you have very poor judgment, and you learn, and you develop better judgment the next time around. But that's what every citizen, I think, has to worry about that. You make judgments every day,
Yes.
Am I going to do this, or I'm going to do that? And some are more consequential than others. When you chose the tie to wear today, that was a judgment that you had to make, and you chose the wrong style of tie.
I'll ask you about the bow tie later. Yeah. I've heard some stories there.
But so everybody makes judgments every day, and some are more consequential than others. And so what you try to do is build on your experiences, and you have bad experiences give you judgment for good experiences in the future. And you watch other people, and you watch the environment, and you exercise that judgment in a way that advances things rather than creating problems.
Yes.
And when you exercise poor judgment, when you do something poor judgment, the best thing you possibly do is just admit it quickly.
Yes.
People hope that that cavity will heal itself, and it doesn't. So admit it quickly, have a plan to get out of the bad judgment that you made, and move on.
And conversely, going back to something that you mentioned earlier, if you could comment a little bit on building those relationships with students and faculty and other members on campus, if you could maybe just comment on that a little bit more.
Sure. As I said, the relationship is built on those four things. But you have to be sincere about building those relationships. If you are only watching for yourself, and you don't have the other person's interest at heart.
Yes.
And you can say all kinds of things, but people will see through that pretty quickly. What was it? Wadsworth Longfellow, I think, said you can stand on a hilltop and shout about the high moral and ethical qualities that you have, but if it's not true, the thunder of what is true will deafen what you're saying, deafen people to what you're saying. So you got to walk the walk. If you say you're going to do something, you got to do it. You have to behave ethically and treat people ethically, and if you do that, and you try to have an outcome that benefits this person or this group or this entity first and you second.
Yes.
It'll always be good for you if you benefit them first. It'll work out for you.
Thank you. Excellent. So leading by example is a big part of that.
You got to stand up.
If you could share with me briefly some of your greatest challenges that you've experienced as a tenured president here during your time? Well, I'm sure there are many.
yeah, there are, and I've made plenty of mistakes. The one that most people think of most often is a financial challenge, and while money is not the root of all evil, the love of money is the root of all evil. That's what the Bible says. A lot of things that happen come down to whether you have the resources to do them, as an individual or an organization. And so challenges are always financial. But that's always there. That's kind of the foundation for everything, and it's always a challenge. It's been a challenge as long as I've been in university administration. We always look back and say, "Oh, those were the golden years." Well, when we were in them, we didn't think they were golden years. It was a challenge. But the real challenge is finding the right people to put in the right spot, in the right job. The most important job that a dean at a college has is hiring faculty members and hiring the right faculty members, and hiring faculty members that believe in what we're doing and how we're doing it. We're a teaching institution, so being a good teacher is premier. I want a dean to find good teachers. Yeah. And we make mistakes sometimes. You have the best judgment of everybody because we vet them endlessly, but we make mistakes. Finding the right staff person, finding the right dean that can do that first job, find the right staff person that can do things, find the right vice president that can do things, is a huge challenge. And I believe in concept of fit. You can have the credentials, you can have the experience, you can have had success. If you bring all of those and you just don't fit in the organization for whatever reason, right now it might be personality, it might be person, it turns out it wasn't exactly the right match of experience, it might be ambition, whatever it is, if it doesn't fit, it's going to be harder for you to succeed, and therefore we've made a mistake in bringing the person in and in hiring the person.
Yes. So
you've got to be able to hire people. And then you've got to be able to have that insight to what's going to work and what makes the organization work.
Right.
How do you move it forward? Does everybody buy into this idea? If they don't buy into it, they're not going to work for it.
Definitely. Thank you for that, sir. And lastly here, if I could just ask you, is there anything that you'd like to tell me about yourself as a leader that you maybe haven't already shared that you think I should know?
You sound like a lawyer. You've been listening to your wife. That's always the last question lawyers say. Anything else I should know?
Well, I always put the disclaimer out there in case I didn't cover something.
No, I don't know that I am in any way unique or remarkable. Each of us, has a job to do, and we try to do the job as best we can. And as you take on more responsibility, typically in life, whether it's deciding to have a child and raising a kid, or taking a job and doing something different and keep moving through the organization, you have to see how you can do that and whether that's right for you or not. It may be right, it may not be right. We're each of us very lucky when we find that path that we love and we seem to be meeting the basic need, what's needed at that moment in time. And that'll change. That'll change over time. The thing that I think leaders should be worrying about is will they recognize when it's changed around them, and they didn't adapt.
Yes.
I remember when I first went to work at the university, we had all of the leadership had been in leadership positions, much smaller institute. University of Oklahoma, when I first went to work there, we probably had 10,000 students, maybe. I mean, today it seems like a really small school. It's the University of Oklahoma, big football powerhouse, athletic powerhouse. 10,000 people. Well, most of the administrators that were there had all come after World War II, and had all been veterans coming out of World War II, including the president of the university.
Yes.
And there was, and this would have been in the 70s by then, and technology had started to have an impact, and we had a big old room full of a blue computer, IBM computer 1401 or something, big old huge room, and you had all those cards that, those IBM 8080 cards. And so they recognized that those people were nearing the end of their career, and they wanted new people in. And so they brought probably about 8 or 9 of us the same year into the university, all just recent graduates, all about the same age, all with practically no experience, and they brought all of us in. And looking back, I didn't know it at the time. Looking back on it, what they were doing is trying to set up a succession process. And we thought we knew a lot, and we didn't. And we were audacious, and so we would have fun teasing at the expense of the boss or whatever. But there was this one guy that was in the purchasing office, big office, and it was an important office at the time, procurement officer of the university. He had written books that talked about the best practices in purchasing, and he had several that he had written. He had an organization that people came from other universities to look at, except that they didn't make the transition to technology. And even though we were at the very beginning of that, it was clear that they hadn't done anything to mechanize what they were doing. And he didn't want to change anything that he was doing. He would sit behind his desk and watch the paper go by, and it had passed him by and he didn't know it. And so his name was, he went by first initials. His first initials were DR. His last name was Camry, DR Camry. And so we would joke that, he's just kind of retired in place. And then we would joke, I wonder if we'll recognize when we have the DR Camry Syndrome ourselves. And I think about that all the time. And that was 40 years ago.
Yes.
But I'm thinking, well, I recognize when I'm DR Camry.
Yes.
Because you got to get out of the way. When that happens, you got to get out of the way and move on. It's much better to leave when you recognize that you've done what you can do, and it's time, than to wait until you're over the hill and sliding.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm hoping for, to recognize when that's going to happen. Right now, I don't think it has, but somebody's going to tell me.
That's a powerful insight, sir. Thank you for that. DR Camry.
DR Camry Syndrome. Nice man, great man. He just stayed a few years too long.
Well, Dr. Farley, I want to thank you again for allowing me to interview you today, to record the interview even, and take time out of your busy schedule for me.
Glad to do it, and I hope it was at least entertaining for you.
Oh, it definitely was.
If not helpful, and go back and tell your president hello for me.
I hope you enjoyed today's interview. Our next guest will be the Dr. Jerry D. Campbell, Professor of Civic Engagement. So stay tuned for that episode that'll be coming out here shortly. Beyond that, I just want to stress the importance of leading wherever you are, engaging in ethical practices, and ultimately taking on greater roles of responsibility so that you can impact those around you. And you heard several of those themes today with Dr. Farley. You have been listening to Singing in the Rain, a podcast series that interviews artists, educators, and innovators who are focused on positive social change in difficult times. Singing in the Rain is a production brought to you by Claremont Lincoln University, CLU Live. For more, subscribe, share, and visit us at claremontlincoln.edu.